Hello and welcome back. In this first video, we'll introduce the concept of sentencing guidelines, touch on different ways the states may follow them, and identify how they are enforced here in the state of Michigan. If you are new to the channel, take a minute to hit the subscribe button before we get started. Sentencing guidelines are a range of recommended penalties, which are taken into consideration with several factors to provide guidance on how a judge should sentence a defendant. Many people are familiar with the sentencing guidelines on the federal level as they relate to drug-related offenses. The most pressing issue there has been is the disproportionate effect the guidelines have had on individuals of color. The U.S. government has taken steps in recent years to address those harms. We'll talk more about the current status of those laws and their effects in an upcoming video. Individual states each have their own policies when it comes to enforcement of the guidelines. In some states, the sentencing system is indeterminate, meaning there is greater discretion given to the courts in deciding how closely they follow the sentencing guidelines. In those states, the court may consider a wider variety of factors as they pertain to a specific offender. As a result, the sentences are more tailored to one's individual circumstances. Michigan is considered to be an indeterminate state. In states where sentences are determinate, there is less latitude given to the courts in how they may sentence. This is achieved through the requirement that offenders serve sentences that are predetermined and set for a fixed period of time. There are several arguments both for and against this, though the overreaching result of determinate sentencing is that offenders typically spend more time incarcerated. Now, in addition to having either an indeterminate or determinate system, states each have their own policy on whether or not the guidelines are mandatory. In states where the guidelines are mandatory, the judiciary is required to sentence offenders by adhering to the guidelines. Here, in Michigan and in some other states, the guidelines are advisory. This means that the courts must take the guidelines into account, but aren't required to follow the suggestion exactly. There is an exception to this. There are still certain offenses for which Michigan law requires a mandatory determinate penalty. For those particular crimes, the guidelines do not apply. There is a required sentence set for a fixed period of time, and it is mandatory for the courts to follow it during sentencing. In part 2 of this video, we're going to cover Michigan's 8 felony classes, several other variables that are considered, and how they are combined to calculate a sentencing guideline recommendation. Be sure to turn on the notifications so that you don't miss out on part 2. Please continue to take care of yourself and each other. We'll see you next time.